Judging by the comments on the previous video, one video wasn't enough to cover all the wacky warriors and fighting games. So today, we'll be counting down another top 10 weirdest fighting game characters. This list will be based more around viewer submissions and recommendations from last time around because, there were some bizarre ones that I missed. The same conditions from the previous video apply here as well. One character per franchise, and if you don't see a character that doesn't appear here, make sure to check out the previous top 10 weirdest character video, and if you still don't see him, scream at me. Let's go!
Mukuro from Blazblue. Mukuro is far from being a joke character. Well, kinda. Mukuro is a senseless, bloodthirsty assassin who previously appeared in the Last Blade series as Shikyo. He got trapped in the Makai due to Hell's Gate shutting in on him and killing him. He would be reanimated as the zombie warrior Mukuro. Though his combat skills were not at the level they were when he was alive, he retained his lust for blood and killing. While zombies have a fearsome rep, they also kinda look weird, and Mukuro is no exception. He kinda looks like he could have been in Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. He is a wild, brutal, swift slasher style with his lunatic blades. Now however, there is one strange yet brutal move he has in which he lodges the blade into a grounded opponent and violently jerks it around. There is more goofiness in his voice and certain movements rather than his fighting style. Now while appropriate, there is something kooky about his voice. Can you guess what it is? It kinda actually reminds you of the distorted bleating of Lord Raptor. Despite being a zombie though, he can be super fast on his feet with a very odd running dash. The silliness lies in his story ending though. Mukuro pulls a Deadpool by breaking the fourth wall, giving the peace sign and then blowing deadly kisses at the player. He swims through the air, eventually colliding head on with the "game over" text. Yeah.
Mudman from World Heroes. Most people find Shaman Witch Doctor characters as either really cool or really weird and creepy. I personally find them really cool. His overall look isn't way out of the box and isn't the sole reason why Mudman is weird. First off, the mask. It's kinda goofy yet kinda cool how it changes facial expressions as if it's his own face, which if you look, is totally not the case. On top of that, he uses it for almost everything. It's a shield whenever he blocks attacks, it's a weapon for a majority of not so normal normals. Like, he isn't swinging it around like wrestlers swing steel chairs, he's relentlessly headbutting, twisting, and shooting summoned spirit projectiles from it. Just when you think that's as wacky as it gets, he even uses it to keep himself afloat while spinning in mid-air. It's pretty much a Tatsumaki except he's repeatedly pelting you with his knees, which actually seems more painful. While he may appear intimidating and despite his kooky quirks, he's a very righteous spirit warrior who seeks to protect nature from evil forces to one day ensure his place in the heavens. You're probably wondering, why of all things would such a spiritual warrior be named Mudman? The name and the character's overall design is a homage to manga artist Daijiro Moroshi's series, Mudman.
Saturn, Dyer, and Prince from Star Gladiator. I know I said one character per franchise, but these two are so similar that I just called it a draw on this one. Just look at them. I'm probably not the first to mention this, but the only thing I can chalk it up to is Capcom had the Saurians from Star Wars in mind. Interestingly, Saturn and Prince are of the same alien race and are from the same planet. Now, between the two, Saturn came first, appearing in Star Gladiator Episode 1 Final Crusade. Prince would appear in the second Star Gladiator game, Plasma Sword Nightmare of BILSTEIN. As a mirror image of Saturn, he possesses similar weaponry and moves of Saturn while having a few unique moves. This is kind of funny, seeing that in the Star Gladiator storyline, Prince is quite jealous of Saturn as he is the more popular street performer. He goes as far as to ally with Saturn's enemy, BILSTEIN, to further pursue his rival. Despite their rather silly appearances, their weaponized yo-yos are bizarre yet cool in a way. Both of these aliens have outrageously wacky fighting styles and movements. This ranges from headbutt drops, split drops, and deploying chibi Saturn doll bombs. They both apparently really love to moonwalk as well. Saturn even has a super in which he initiates a dance-off. Even their wind poses are pretty weird. The quirky movements they make while wearing those giant goofy grins are a combo for creepiness.
Chaos from Toshinden. Roughly everything about this guy just screams freak. Speaking of screams, what is this guy on? Well, Chaos apparently had his psyche shattered when he was the subject of an experiment to augment his body and brain. He was brainwashed an additional time by fellow executive Uranus to assassinate their former cohort Gaia, whom is considered a traitor. Yeah, so maybe I should draw back on the jokes a little bit. Like Mukuro, while there's some quirkiness and goofiness to him, he has insane bloodlust and shouldn't be taken as a full-fledged joke. With his 7-foot, 154-pound frame and wielding a scythe and a tortoise shell, Chaos pulls off some pretty kooky yet slightly impressive moves that will make Voldo proud. He's quite acrobatic, moving and attacking off a slew of somersaults, flips, twists, and cartwheels. Then there are some less stellar moves he has, like this move, which is either him swinging his scythe so hard that he face plants, or some ragtag crazy body slam. I could never really tell. Chaos really does his name quite a justice, as he is insanity incarnate. On top of his whacked out fighting style and shrill voice, he has some pretty trolly wind poses.
Mr. Game & Watch from Super Smash Bros. Mr. Game & Watch is a two-dimensional monochromatic man. Pretty plain, right? Wrong. Many are quite familiar with the oddity that is Mr. Game & Watch. Debuting in Super Smash Bros. Melee, he was created as an homage to the Game & Watch series, a series of Nintendo handheld games that were popular in the early 80s and 90s. Smash's roster is made up of various characters from Nintendo's most popular and critically acclaimed series. Seeing that the Game & Watch series was one of Nintendo's first big-time successes, it makes sense that it would include Mr. Game & Watch himself. While his design is pretty basic, he is quite an odd character next to the other three-dimensional characters in Smash. He is two-dimensional after all. They did quite a job fleshing him out, seeing that everything from his movements to his attacks and his voice, which are a bunch of beeps, is lifted straight from the Game & Watch series. As impressive as it is, he's still pretty odd when you look at it in action. Among his strangest signature moves is his neutral special. From the game Chef, Mr. Game & Watch lobs a bunch of sausages and fish and other foods at his opponent from a hot frying pan. Then there is his side smash, lifted from the game Judge, in which he clunks the opponent on the head with a hammer, whose strength goes from 1 to 9, 1 being the weakest and 9 being the KO. Also, there is his Oil Panic Down special move, in which he absorbs projectiles by catching them in a bucket. Once he gets 3, he somehow converts the energy into oil, of all things, which he can splash on the opponent. The potency of this move is determined by the power of the projectile absorbed. Other notable weapons in Game & Watch's kit are a chair, a pesticide pump, a torch, a fishbowl, and a diving helmet that he slips on to deliver a nasty headbutt. Arguably the weirdest move in his kit is his octopus-themed Final Smash, in which he transforms into the titular antagonist, attacking opponents with his tentacles, and it's not that kind of show, people.
Arakune from BlazBlue. Arguably BlazBlue's freakiest character, Arakune is the product of one of those horrible experiment gone wrong backstories. He was once a human named Lot Carmine, a scientist who was obsessed with the Azure. This obsession stemmed from his growing resentment towards his mentor Kokonoe and her ever-growing genius. Lot figured that discovering a link between the Boundary, the Azure Grimoire, and the Black Beast would allow him to outdo Kokonoe and win over his higher-ups. He would end up actually finding a way into the Boundary, but with that discovery came quite the cost. The complex space would progressively cause Lot's body to deform, eventually assuming the form of a dark, shapeless blob. When it comes to Arakune, creepiness isn't just skin deep. His body is the home to a horde of insects. Despite Arakune not having a definite shape, there are bones inside his body. He morphs them into a variety of things, from insect appendages as well as even a cannon which he can fire dark energy out of. It's quite difficult to sum up his fighting style with just a single word. If you ask me, a huge portion of Arakune's attacks and animations make me think he was inspired by the likes of Shumagorath and Venom in the MVC games. He does a bunch of wacky spinning, twisting, diving, bouncing, and surprise shape-shifting attacks. Speaking of Venom, he does have a legion of creepy crawlers at his disposal to harass the opponent with. He literally chews you up and spits you out with his grab. Knowing what's inside of Arakune, that's much more worse than it already sounds. One of Arakune's notable moves is his Crimson Drive technique, which allows him to curse his opponents. The cursed will be assaulted by a swarm of creatures from all sides, making for an effective lockdown, mix-up attempt, and combo extender for Arakune, and a berserk rage quit button for the opponent.
Kusaregedo, Samurai Shodown. Name one of the ugliest fighting game characters of all time by the fighter's generation. Kusaregedo is just as strange as he is gigantic. Just look at that face. Look at it. Depending on who you are, you either find his appearance super goofy or incredibly creepy. And if you're among the flock that find him goofy, I have you know his backstory is quite the opposite. Like Arakune, he was initially a human and a loving father to his daughter Hakana. The two lived in perfect harmony, but those times would be tarnished by Kusaregedo's sudden appetite for human flesh, especially for children. Ugh. When his death would come around, he would be transformed into a demon as punishment for his cannibalism. He was additionally cursed with an even more insatiable hunger for human flesh, killing whomever to satisfy it. He would eventually run into a girl who pled with him to stop his cannibalistic ways. Kusaregedo refused and then devoured her. The girl he consumed was Hakana, his own daughter. Kusaregedo's cannibalism does play into his moves and mannerisms. His win pose involves him munching on his own arm. Even Kusaregedo's finishing move involves, you guessed it, him eating his opponent whole and spitting out their skull and or hair. As expected, this move had to be censored for the game's international release. His weapon of choice is also pretty weird and gruesome as well. His arm has an exposed bone sharpened at the wrist in the form of a sharp spike, which he uses to slice and impale opponents. He does use his other hand, but mostly for very wild, unfocused slaps and smacks. With each attack, he yelps out in what has to be the most annoying, silliest voice I've ever heard before in my life. If my eyes were closed, Kusaregedo would sound like Lex Luthor when Brainiac burst out of him in the Justice League cartoon. I would have rather this guy eat himself alive rather than eat his own poor daughter.
Jack from Power Stone. While I think he's actually a pretty cool looking character, it still begs the question, what is he? His age is unknown, he's fairly tall, standing 6'3", yet he's pretty light, weighing only 112 pounds. It's suggested he's English, seeing that 1. His noted birthplace is Manchester, reference to the English city Manchester, and 2. His name and concept were inspired by the infamous unidentified English serial killer, Jack the Ripper. His bandages give off a mummy vibe. He loves shiny things, loves them so much that he spent much of his life robbing strangers of their jewelry. Something he also loves? Slicing, dicing, cutting and gutting things with his knives. In figuring out who or what Jack is, his power change transformation doesn't make the mystery any easier. Interestingly, he's known as the Mad Clown when in this form. Yeah, I see nothing funny about this. He looks more like a mechanical insect with blades instead of spikes. Clearly this guy really loves his blades. Jack is an agile, unpredictable oddball combatant. He stands out amongst the Power Stone roster in that he's the only one that crawls. His crawling seemingly shrinks his hitbox, enabling him to dodge many attacks others cannot. His attacks are best described as acrobatic yet bizarre. The wackiness is only cranked up when he assumes his power change form, with him gaining hella range with his extended limbs. Jack can even keep himself afloat with his blades while doing the greatest helicopter impersonation. Hornet from Fighters Megamix. Fighters Megamix was another one of those franchise fighting games. It consisted of a roster centered around some of the most popular Sega characters in games. The main roster was mostly occupied by Virtua Fighter and Fighting Vipers characters. Then there were unlockables including Janet from Virtua Cop 2, Bark and Bean from Sonic the Fighters, Rent-A-Hero from Rent-A-Hero, this thing, which also could have made this list, but we had to give it to the resident Daytona USA representative, Hornet. Yeah, you heard that right, and no, this isn't a mod or Mugen. Clearly Sega desperately wanted to represent Daytona USA in this game, and rightfully so. It's one of the most recognizable racing games ever. It would appear they weren't satisfied with just having Daytona stages, so they went and included a car on the roster. Hornet plays like a Fighting Vipers character, seeing that it can have its armor knocked off, revealing its engine and other anatomy. This thing doesn't transform at all, if you're wondering. It stands on its back wheels and attacks with all 4. Every one of these characters' animations just looks silly. Like, I don't know how to describe its fighting style. It does seem to have some kind of tackle attack as it gets on all 4s, wheels that is, and attempts to run the opponent over. Then there's another attack in which it grabs opponents by the face and viciously rotates its wheels, effectively burning rubber in the flesh of the opponent. On paper that sounds pretty savage, but when you see it, it's still kind of goofy. Probably the weirdest thing about Hornet though? Mirror matches.
Get picked up by Cyclops. I'm gonna jump back.
Nrvnqsr from Melty Blood. Believe it or not, that is how you pronounce his name. If his name simply made you go WTF, wait until you see how he fights. For starters, look at this picture of him. True to his name, he is constructed from chaos. The insanity that you see occupying much of his body are creatures which he has absorbed. Formerly known as the alchemist Fabro Rowan, he developed an interesting method during his research of magic. This method allowed him to absorb the lives of other living creatures, merge them with his own existence to obtain immortality, and become a dead apostle. Dead apostles are humans that become vampires by the actions of another vampire, or in Nero's case, magecraft. His mind is gradually fading away due to his union with the beasts that he absorbed. While he is aware of this, his truest and deepest desire is to understand the chaos that created him, even if that same chaos were to consume him. While knowing his backstory does garner a bit of understanding about Nero, it still doesn't make any of his quirks less weird. Some of his animations and attacks are just bizarre for such a character with a dark persona. At the same time, there is a bit of a cool factor to some of them. For example, one of the beasts he summons are crows. They gracefully fly up in the air only to shoot Lord knows what down at the opponents. He even has a super in which he summons a bunch of them to harass you. Talk about a murder.
Funny. Real funny.
He has long-range pokes in the form of insect appendages, a bull, and a dragon's tail. Yeah, this guy absorbed a freaking dragon! The one that got to me was the deer. This guy throws out a deer that gleefully gallops all over the opposition. When you put that next to the more killer animals like the wolves, hounds, and alligators, I have no words. Speaking of hounds, they make for one of his win poses as 3 of them pop out from Nero's chest and laugh at the defeated opponent. Did he go into the underworld and absorb Cerberus too? Ugh! If all that wasn't enough, he can condense all of his beasts into one ultimate nightmare of a form known as the 999th Beast. This form represents the Chaos's ultimate strength. While this transformation is actually pretty cool, everything else about this behemoth that I just mentioned is just a maniacal mixture of wackiness. Well, those are my picks. Could I have possibly missed anybody else? I guess with more fighting games coming out and new characters, could be constantly keeping up with this for a while. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Thank you for being patient with me getting this episode out. I know it's been a while, but it's finally out here. I wish I could have gotten my friends in on some more action, but scheduling differences caused us to like only have them featured just a little bit. But don't you worry, you might see them back sometime later because they had fun doing this, and I'm more than willing to have them and possibly some other narrators come by and help me out with this. So thank you all for your recommendations from the last video. Without that, I couldn't have made this video. You're all the best, you rock. Totally don't cancel that. Smite reference. I need to stop. But yeah, see you next time.